now we'd like to invite our first guest speaker to speak today. Monica Durham is here to share with us her story as a preeclampsia survivor. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you all for coming out today, and thank you for Jennifer and Tiffany for asking me to share my story. So all I ever wanted to do when I was a kid was be a mother and a wife. And so I met my wonderful husband about 7 years ago, and we started on our quest to become parents. We found out that we needed fertility help, and so in 2009 we decided to go to a fertility specialist, and they told us we were going to have to do in vitro. We decided we'd rather buy a house in Spain than spend lots of money and not have a baby as a guarantee. Then our insurance picked it up, and last year, about this time, I became pregnant with our daughter. We saw her at about 8 cells when she was implanted, and we went for our 6-week checkup, and she was about 4 days behind. And they told us, it's not going to happen. Don't get excited. So we went for our 7-week checkup, and they checked the heartbeat, and they said, she's only 120 beats. It's not going to happen. Don't get excited. So then we went for our 8-week visit, and she said, you know what? The baby's heartbeat's perfect, but don't get excited. It may not happen. At 9 weeks, the doctor had me up in stirrups, and she's looking inside. She bangs her head on my knee while I'm still up in stirrups and says, my goodness, this baby's going to prove us wrong. She's holding on. You can now go to your OB. So I went to my OB, and we had our first checkup, and the OB said, and our doctor actually was there, and she said, you know, right now you're kind of borderline with your blood pressure, but it's not high blood pressure, so you should be okay. You'll make it to 36 weeks. Don't worry about it. I said, great. Well, at 10 weeks and 4 days, I started bleeding. It was a very heavy bleeding, so I went and saw my midwife, and she thought we lost our baby. So she did an ultrasound, and there was our baby with her little arms and legs flailing, going, Mom, don't give up. I'm still here. Then we went for our 12-week visit to get our ultrasound, and I had a hematoma inside the umbilical sac. So they told us, don't tell anyone you're pregnant. You're going to rupture at 14 to 16 weeks. So I still had hope, and I said, it's going to happen. This baby's fighting all the odds. She told me, you cannot go any further than your bathroom. You have to stay in bed. So we waited, and we stayed in bed, or I stayed in bed, she with me, of course. And at 20 weeks, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. We didn't rupture, and here the baby was still, growing. We were happy. We're halfway through. At this point, my blood pressure had started to rise. I found a text message I sent my mom, and it said, my blood pressure is 170 over 110, but don't worry, it'll go down. And every time I went to see the doctor, I would say, oh, the blood pressure's been reading a little bit high. And she'd say, oh, take it again and again. So at 24 weeks, we did the wonderful urine sample test where you stick the urine in your fridge. Disgusting. And my protein level came out to be 300. Now, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know that 300 was borderline. So I went along my daily stuff, getting excited, here comes this baby, cooking all the food, getting ready for this baby to come. At 28 weeks, my blood pressure started to spike, and I started to see psychedelic shapes on the walls, and I didn't realize this was preeclampsia. I thought, wow, there's psychedelic shapes on the walls. Pregnancy's awesome. Then I started to be clumsy. I used to bump into walls, get lightheaded, and I thought, it's pregnancy brain. There's nothing wrong, this is just normal. So they did an ultrasound at that point just to kind of see where the baby was, and she was fine, and they said, you're doing okay, just take some bed rest. So then at 32 weeks, that Sunday, I felt my baby kick only about 3 times. And the midwife had told me, she said, when you move around a lot, you may not feel your baby kick, but your baby's moving. So then on Monday, I didn't feel her at all. So Monday afternoon, I called the doctor and I said, hey, I only felt her kick 3 times yesterday and I haven't felt her today. Should I call you tomorrow if I don't feel her? And she goes, no. Why don't you come on in? We'll do a fetal stress test. So part of going in to see your doctor, is the urine test. So the moment they put the monitor on me, my baby did not stop kicking until the moment she was born. But because we did the urine test, I was leaving the doctor's office, and the nurse ran up to my car and says, you need to come back in. We need to do more testing. I was like, okay, everything okay? She says, yeah, don't worry. So they gave me a blood slip, and they said, blood test slip, and they sent me off to the lab, and I was like, oh, it's almost 5 o'clock, they're going to close, I don't want to rush. She's like, no, you need to do it today. So I went in with my blood test, and then they called me on Wednesday morning and said, you know what, you need to do the 24-hour urine. We are not happy with the protein levels. So that Wednesday I asked the midwife, I said, look, I don't know what these numbers mean. You people keep telling me numbers, but what do these numbers mean? And she said, well, if you have a protein level of 500, we need to talk about taking this baby out. And I said, okay, 500, so what's 505? What's 600? What do these numbers mean? She said, well, if you have 600, we definitely need to take this baby out. So I went for my ultrasound, and we saw our darling daughter, and we did our first 3D ultrasound, and instead of showing us her face, she just kept sticking up her finger going number 1. And I was driving home from the ultrasound, excited that I'd gotten to see her, and I got a phone call on my way home, and the midwife called and said, your doctor's in labor and delivery. You need to go there immediately. Of course, I'm shocked. I think everything's okay, you know, psychedelic swirls and everything. It's all right. And I got there, and she said, I'd like to do your 24-hour urine in the hospital. So I went into labor and delivery. It took them about 5 sticks to get the IV, and two anesthesiologists to get the IV in my arm. And then that night I went up to antepartum. The next day, my husband was leaving to go work on his leave from work, and he kind of just grayed out on me. And I was laughing. He grayed out. No idea what it meant. And so they were kind of on me because I wasn't telling them all my symptoms throughout the pregnancy because I didn't realize it was important. And the nurse came back in. She ripped my iPad out of my hand, closed the curtains, and said, no more stimulation. We're prepping you for emergency C-section. I was in shock. I couldn't believe that I had gone from coming to the hospital for a test to we're taking your baby now. 32 weeks was too soon. So I called my husband and said, honey, I think you might want to come back. So my doctor came in. She said, your baby's weighing about 4 pounds. I think you can push it out. So they moved me down to labor and delivery that night. And on Thursday morning, on Friday morning, I was started to get the tablet to soften my cervix. At 5 a.m., they put one more tablet in, and I started having contractions. They told me my baby wasn't coming until Saturday, so I had sent my husband home and said, hey, go take care of the dog. I'm going to need you to help me push this baby out. So they were softening the cervix. I started having contractions 7 minutes apart. They went to 3 minutes and 1 minute. My husband showed up at 6:50, and my doctor showed up at 7 a.m. She said, I'm going to check your cervix. I'm going to see how far dilated you are. She checked my cervix, and she pulled her hand out, and there was a little blood. And now we had heard about show in our classes, so we were like, oh, it's just a little bit of show, nothing to worry about. And the doctor walked out of the room. Suddenly I turned to my husband, I go, you know what? I think my water just broke, or I'm bleeding. So the nurse happened to walk in. He said, you know, I think her water just broke, or she's bleeding or something. The nurse lifted the sheet, turned white, and walked out. Within 2 minutes, my doctor was back with an ultrasound machine and in her scrubs. She checked the baby and saw that she said, she's fine, the placenta looks fine, everything's fine, we should go ahead and go. So immediately they started rolling me out of the car, out of the room. I was pulling my IV by myself, and we had just put this new IV in with 7 sticks. So I was pretty protective of that IV. So I screamed, stop, in the middle of the hall. And all these 15 people stopped and looked at me. And they went ahead and checked my IV and pulled it along with us. I went into the C-section room, and they bent me in half to put the spinal block. Didn't have time for lidocaine or anything. Put the spinal block in, and I could hear the blood kind of dripping off the table because I was hemorrhaging so fast. And I could hear the blood dripping off the table, and I said, stop, something's coming out. And it turned out to be softball-sized blood clot, not the baby. So they turned me over, strapped me down, and they put the oxygen mask on me. And they had it kind of coming off my face, so I was like, I can't breathe. I don't have the oxygen. I was so afraid I'd be awake when they did the C-section. So he put it back on me, and because I had had magnesium because of the high blood pressure, the muscles had stopped, and I couldn't breathe. And I thought to myself, I forgot to kiss my husband goodbye. And then I thought, I'm going to die. I couldn't breathe. I was suffocating, and I'm going to die. And I looked at my doctor at the foot of the bed with her hand on my stomach and the scalpel, looking at the anesthesiologist. And he asked for a trach tray. And I thought, if I go, at least my husband has my daughter. And then I passed out, luckily. My husband, who now tells me the rest of the story, of course, had to go to a resuscitation room. He heard everything going on because he was right outside the door. He thought I had passed away. He goes to the resuscitation room and sees our daughter, and she's limp and she's blue. And for those few minutes, he thought that was the end. He thought he had lost both of us. Luckily, she's here. Everything's fine. But we found out later, after that she was born, that my protein levels were at 1,500, 3 times of what they were looking for. So I guess what I would like to do first of all is thank you all for coming out here and helping. Pass the word along. Had I known more, I would have been more diligent about what was going on. I would have asked for help instead of waiting for help. And thank you all for coming out today and letting me share my story.
Thank you so much, Monica, for sharing your story today with our audience.